Station 17, we have a report of smoke in the kitchen at 2245 Maple. Proceed with caution. The radio crackled, ignored. One firefighter laughed, probably just burning dinner again. Let them air it out. They had no idea the man calling for help was watching the clock, and they had no idea who would be waiting for them at the station the next morning. The man on the phone was Michael Vance, a former Marine and 20-year veteran of big city fire departments. He had just moved his family across the country to take command of this very station. But as the crew dismissed his emergency, they revealed a culture of neglect that went far beyond one delayed call. The question was no longer if he would clean house, but how deep the rot had spread. And the answer would arrive with the sunrise, when he walked through their door not as a citizen, but as their chief. Vidrush Final Crypt. Michael Vance wasn't just any new hire. His resume was a study in controlled chaos, decorated Marine, paramedic, a lieutenant who'd led the rescue at the infamous Granite Point warehouse fire. He'd been recruited specifically to fix Station 17. The city council's diversity report had been damning. Complaints from minority neighborhoods about slow response times had spiked 40% over 5 years. Internal morale surveys showed a department fractured by cliques and whispers. Vance was their solution. A respected outsider handed a near-impossible mandate: transform a toxic culture or recommend the station's closure. But the crew at 17 saw things differently. To veterans like Lieutenant Carl Riggs, a 25-year man with a thick mustache and thicker pride, outsiders were the problem. The city was meddling, imposing quotas, risking their brotherhood with political correctness. The night of the call, Riggs was holding court in the day room, feet up on the scarred oak table. Around him sat firefighter Jake Dahlen, known for his cruel humor, and probie Tim Reeves, eager to please. The alarm for 2245 Maple had chimed alongside 2 other medical assists. Riggs made the call. Let dispatch know we're tied up. The smoke call can wait. They didn't know the voice on the other end of that 911 call belonged to a man who could measure response times in the blood of his fallen Marines. Vance, in his new home just 8 blocks from the station, had watched the clock. 4 minutes, 5. The smell of electrical smoke grew sharper. His youngest daughter started to cough. He called back, voice tight. This is 2245 Maple. We need an engine now. The dispatcher's frustrated reply crackled through Station 17 speakers. Caller is reiterating smoke visible. Jake Dahlen snorted. Probably overloaded a circuit frying something. But they don't even have a working fire extinguisher. This attitude wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom. Nationally, only about 8% of firefighters are black, a statistic that hasn't budged much in decades, compared to over 80% who are white. Departments like this one had histories written in segregation, where black firefighters, when they were hired at all, were given separate beds and assigned the menial chores. That legacy cast a long shadow. It created insular cultures where certain neighborhoods, often minority communities, were viewed with a subconscious bias, as problems rather than people to protect. Vance had studied the files before accepting the job. He knew about the pending lawsuit from a black former candidate who alleged the physical aptitude test was designed to fail people of color. He'd read the report about the firefighter who found racist graffiti on his locker. The city manager had been blunt. We need someone who won't just ignore the rot. We need someone to cut it out. Vance saw it as his last, greatest mission. He'd moved his family across 3 states, believing he could bridge the divide. That belief shattered as he listened to the casual contempt in his own dispatcher's voice. At the 9-minute mark, with no sirens in earshot, Vance took matters into his own hands. He found the source, a smoldering outlet behind the refrigerator, and killed the breaker. The immediate danger passed, but a colder fury took its place. He walked to his home office, where his new chief's uniform hung in a garment bag. The dark blue fabric, the gold insignia on the collar, the white gloves. He touched the badge, still cool from the box. His first official day was tomorrow at 0700. He had planned a speech about fresh starts and shared purpose. That plan was now ash. Meanwhile, back at the station, The shift was winding down. Riggs regaled the crew with stories of the old days before all the rules. You used to be able to tell a homeowner they were an idiot for not having a smoke detector. Now you have to hand them a pamphlet and a smile. Everyone laughed except for the driver, a quiet man named Ben Carter. Carter had been at 17 for 12 years. He'd seen good men pushed out. He'd also seen the slow response maps and how they eerily overlapped with the poorer, blacker parts of their district. He said nothing. He just polished the already spotless windshield of Engine 12, his reflection troubled in the glass. The city slept. In a modest apartment on the south side, Luis Garcia, the dispatcher who had taken Vance's calls, was also awake. He'd been uneasy since hanging up. Protocol was clear. Smoke investigation trumps all but confirmed structure fires. He'd argued with Riggs softly. "Lieutenant, the protocol," Riggs had cut him off. "I know the protocol, Garcia. I also know the difference between a real fire and someone who doesn't know how to use a stove." Garcia now replayed the caller's voice in his head. It was calm, authoritative, precise. It didn't sound like panic. It sounded like a professional assessing a failure. He made a decision. He logged the exact time of the call, the time of Riggs's verbal hold order, and the time the crew finally, casually, cleared for the scene 22 minutes later. He saved the log privately, a tiny act of defiance. Dawn arrived, pale and quiet. At 0600, Michael Vance stood before his bathroom mirror, knotting his tie with marine precision. He placed the chief's badge on his chest. It felt heavier than any metal. He kissed his sleeping daughters, walked out to his car, and drove the short, fateful route to Station 17. He didn't park in the chief's reserved spot out front. He parked on the street, out of view. He wanted to see the house in its natural state before his presence changed the ecosystem. At 0645, the night shift was bleary, cleaning dishes from breakfast. Riggs was in his office, filling out the run report from the night. For the Maple Street call, he wrote, "Dispatched for odor of smoke. Upon investigation, determined to be minor electrical fault, resolved by occupant. No department action required." He omitted the delay. He omitted the laughter. He signed it with a flourish. Downstairs, Jake Dolan was holding court again, mimicking what he imagined the panicked homeowner sounded like, probably jumping up and down in his slippers. The crew chuckled. Ben Carter didn't. He was looking out the apparatus bay door, where a figure in a crisp blue uniform was walking, not from the staff parking lot but from the street, walking with a purpose that made Carter's spine straighten. The man stepped into the open bay. Morning light silhouetted him, gleaming off the gold on his collar. The casual chatter in the dayroom died mid-sentence. Riggs, coming down the stairs with his coffee mug, froze. He saw the badge first. Then he saw the face. It was the same face from the driver's license photo attached to the new chief's memo they'd all ignored last week. The memo that gave the start date as today. The blood drained from Riggs's face. His mug hit the concrete floor with an explosive crash, shattering and spraying hot coffee across the boots of his crew, who were now standing at a confused, dawning attention. Michael Vance didn't glance at the mess. He looked from Riggs to Dolan to the others, his expression unreadable. He finally spoke, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Lieutenant, my office." Now. Then he turned his gaze on the rest of them. "The rest of you do not move. We have 22 minutes of radio silence to discuss." The door to the chief's office, which had been Lieutenant Riggs's space for a decade, clicked shut with a finality that echoed in the silent bay. Inside, Michael Vance didn't sit behind the desk. He stood at the window, his back to Riggs, looking out at the apparatus floor where his crew stood frozen. When he spoke, his voice was deceptively calm. "You logged it as a minor electrical fault, resolved by the occupant. Is that accurate, Lieutenant?" Riggs cleared his throat, the bravado from the night before completely gone. "Yes, Chief. Upon our eventual investigation, that was the determination." "Our eventual investigation." Vance turned. His eyes were like flint. "You arrived at 22 minutes after dispatch. The national standard for first due engine response is under 5 minutes. Explain the delay." "We were prioritizing calls," Riggs said, reciting the excuse he'd rehearsed in his head. We had 2 medical assists holding. A smoke investigation is a lower priority until we have confirmation of fire. Vance walked to the desk and tapped a key on the computer, bringing up the dispatch log for the entire shift. The 2 medical assists. One was for an elderly woman with dizziness, handled by ambulance. The other was a man with a stubbed toe. You held engine 12 in quarters for both. You were not tied up. You chose not to go. Riggs felt a cold sweat at the base of his neck. He hadn't expected the new chief to dive into the logs within minutes of arrival. He stammered. It was a judgment call, Chief, based on the caller's demeanor. "My demeanor, Lieutenant?" Vance asked softly. Riggs's blood ran cold. The chief leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. "The caller was me, Michael Vance, your new chief. The address was 2245 Maple, my home, where my 2 daughters were sleeping down the hall from an electrical fire you decided wasn't worth your time." The room seemed to tilt. Riggs's mouth went dry. All the color left his face. "Sir, I had no idea." "That's the problem." Vance's voice cracked like a whip, the Marine commander surfacing. "You had no idea who it was, so you made an assumption. You assumed it was a nuisance call. You assumed it wasn't important. You assumed the people on the other end of that line were less deserving of your prompt professional care. That is a failure of duty. That is prejudice. And in my firehouse, it is a fireable offense." Down in the bay, the crew could hear the raised voice but not the words. Jake Dolan tried to smirk, but it looked sickly. Ben Carter slowly picked up the pieces of Riggs's shattered mug, his movements deliberate. Proby Tim Reeves looked like he might be sick. The new chief had been the caller. The math was catastrophic. Vance straightened up, pulling a thumb drive from his pocket. "I've already downloaded the dispatch audio from last night. I've heard the conversation between Garcia and this room. I've heard the laughter. Before I decide what happens next, I want the truth from you. Not the watered-down version for the union rep. The truth. Start with the map." Riggs blinked. "The map." "The response time map on your server. The one color-coded by neighborhood. The one that shows a clear, consistent pattern of delayed responses in the South and West districts. The parts of town with the highest minority populations. Who created it?" Riggs was trapped. The map was an open secret, a tool they used to manage their workload, or so they told themselves. "The older guys, we've always known some areas are higher risk for false alarms. It's about resource allocation." "It's about profiling," Vance corrected, his voice icy. "You're delaying emergency response based on zip code. Do you have any idea what that means? Last year, Mrs. Alina Banks on Willow Street died from a heart attack. Engine 12's response was logged at 14 minutes. The average for the district is 6. She lived in a black neighborhood. Was that a resource allocation decision too?" Riggs had no answer. He remembered the Banks call. It had been a busy night. They'd taken the longer route. Vance's next move was surgical. He opened the office door and called out, "Firefighter Carter." A moment. Ben Carter walked up the stairs, wiping his hands on his pants, his face unreadable. He stepped into the office, glancing at the pale, shaken Riggs. "Carter, you've been here 12 years, Vance stated. You drive the engine. You hear everything. I'm asking you directly as your chief. Is the delayed response to certain neighborhoods a standing order, an unspoken rule, or just bad luck?" The room held its breath. Carter was a man caught between a lifetime of brotherhood and a gnawing conscience. He looked at Riggs, who stared back with a silent plea. Carter's jaw tightened. He thought of the maps, the jokes in the dayroom, the way certain addresses were pronounced with a dismissive sigh. It's cultural, Chief. Nobody writes it down, but everybody knows. The South Side calls, you finish your coffee first. Vance nodded as if this confirmed a terrible hypothesis. "Thank you for your honesty, Firefighter Carter. You're dismissed. Wait downstairs." As Carter left, Vance turned back to Riggs. "Culture, that's what you've built here. A culture of neglect. And cultures can be changed, but only after they are exposed." He picked up the phone on the desk. "This is Chief Vance. I need the head of the Firefighters Union, the city manager, and the head of HR in my office within the hour. Then he looked at Riggs. You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Surrender your badge and radio. You will remain in the day room under watch until the union rep arrives. The news spread through the station like a gas leak. Riggs, walking down the stairs with empty hands, his badge and radio left on the chief's desk, was a spectacle that shattered the old world. Jake Dolan started sputtering about rights and grievances. Vance appeared at the top of the stairs, his voice silencing the incipient mutiny. Everyone in the day room, now. They filed in, a group of men suddenly looking less like a unified crew and more like frightened individuals. Vance stood before them, the dispatch thumb drive in his hand. Last night you failed in your primary duty. You failed the community you swore to protect. You failed because you judged the call before you answered it. That ends today. Every run log from the past 3 years is being pulled. Every delayed response is being matched to its address, and every one of you will be interviewed. He let that sink in. The scope of the investigation was vast. It wasn't just about one call, it was about every call. Then he delivered the pivot that changed everything. But this isn't just about you. The city hired me because they knew there was a sickness here. They also knew it might be terminal. The diversity report recommended Station 17's closure and redistribution of its territory if meaningful change wasn't achieved. Your jobs, this house, your brotherhood, it's all on the table. My mandate isn't just to lead you, it's to decide if you're worth saving. The threat of dissolution was real, and it was a grenade tossed into the middle of the room. Even the most defiant faces showed flickers of fear. The station was their identity. Its closure would scatter them, a permanent stain on their careers. Vance continued, your union will tell you to say nothing. Your instinct is to circle the wagons. I'm giving you a different choice. Between now and when the union president arrives, any firefighter who comes to my office voluntarily to give a full, truthful account of how this culture operated will be considered for leniency. Those who wait to be dragged in, the consequences will be severe. He turned and walked back to his office, leaving them in a vortex of panic and calculation. In the stunned quiet, alliances began to crack. Jake Dolan hissed at Ben Carter, you ratted us out. Carter met his gaze. I told the truth, Jake. There's a difference. The probie Tim Reeves looked like a scared kid. What do we do? Meanwhile, Luis Garcia, the dispatcher, had been listening to the chaos over the still-open intercom from the comms room. He made another decision. He printed his private log of the night's events, the one with the exact timestamps. He walked down to the chief's office, past the glaring crew, and knocked. He handed the paper to Vance without a word. The evidence was now not just digital but physical, with a witness's name on it. By 10 a.m., the station was swarming with suits. The union president, a gruff man named O'Malley, was in Vance's office yelling about due process. The city manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Alvarez, listened quietly, reviewing the dispatch audio Vance played for her. The HR director took notes with a grim expression. O'Malley argued, this is a witch hunt over one bad call. You can't dismantle a station based on this. Vance played another audio file. This was from a year ago, a call for a child having an asthma attack on South Pine, the same dismissive tone from the day room, the same deliberate delay. The child survived but spent 3 days in the hospital. The address was in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. It's not one call, Mr. O'Malley, Vance said quietly. It's a pattern, and I have the data to prove it. Alvarez, the city manager, spoke for the first time. Chief Vance's mandate is clear. We have liability exposure that runs into the millions, not to mention the moral bankruptcy. Lieutenant Riggs is suspended pending termination proceedings. The rest of the crew is on administrative duty, no emergency calls until further notice. Overtime will cover the shifts with personnel from other stations. The message was clear. Station 17 was being quarantined. As the suits left, the atmosphere curdled into one of bitter siege. The crew was confined to the station, their rigs idle. They watched as firefighters from Station 9 pulled up in a spare engine to cover their district. It was the ultimate humiliation. But Vance wasn't done. He called Ben Carter into his office again. "Carter, you spoke up. That took courage. I'm putting you in acting command of the crew for the duration of this investigation. Your first task, secure all logbooks, all personal notebooks, every shred of paper in this house. Nothing gets shredded, nothing disappears." Carter accepted, knowing the move made him a permanent pariah to men he'd worked with for years. As he began collecting materials from lockers, he found resistance. Jake Dolan stood in front of his locker, arms crossed. "You're not my chief, Ben." From the doorway, Vance's voice cut in. "But I am. Refusing a direct order during an internal investigation is insubordination. You can hand over your notes voluntarily, or I can have you arrested for obstruction, and we can open that locker with bolt cutters in front of the police. Choose." Dolan, seething, slammed his locker open and shoved a small notebook at Carter. The first crack in the wall had appeared. The process of dismantling the culture, brick by painful brick, had begun. By late afternoon, the local news had gotten a tip. A reporter was outside the station, camera aimed at the closed bay doors. The story was no longer an internal matter. It was poised to become a public scandal. The city manager's office prepared a sterile statement about an internal personnel review, but the genie was out of the bottle. Back in his office, Vance stared at the growing pile of evidence. Logbooks showed cryptic notations like SS call hold and usual suspect address. But he needed the human story, the motive. He found it in the personnel files. He cross-referenced the crew. Most had grown up in the city's historically white North End. Many had fathers or uncles who served in the department during its openly segregated era. The bias wasn't just personal, it was inherited. Then he found the file for a firefighter named Marcus Jones, who had transferred out of station 2 years earlier after filing a formal complaint of racial harassment. The complaint had been dismissed due to lack of corroboration. Vance picked up the phone. He needed to talk to Marcus Jones. As he dialed, he looked out at the day room. The crew sat in isolated silence, a brotherhood atomized. The war for the soul of Station 17 was underway, but Vance knew the first battle had only exposed the battlefield. The real fight, against the union's political power, against a city government that might get cold feet, against a deeply ingrained institutional bias, was just beginning. And the next move would come from outside, from a shadow he hadn't yet seen coming. Marcus Jones answered on the third ring, his voice guarded until Chief Vance identified himself. Then it flattened with cold recognition. "I wondered when you'd call. You've stirred up the hornet's nest, Chief. You all right?" Vance got straight to it. "Your harassment complaint from 2 years ago was dismissed. I'm looking at the file right now. It says there were no witnesses." Jones's laugh was bitter. "Oh, there were witnesses. Ben Carter saw it. Luis Garcia heard it over the radio. But when the union rep and Captain Riggs sat them down, they got real quiet. The message was clear. Corroborate and your career hits a wall. I was the problem, not the culture." "What exactly happened?" Vance pressed. "It started with the maps," Jones explained, his voice tired. "The ones you found, but it wasn't just about slow response. It was about what happened when we did show up. I was the only black firefighter on the shift. If we got a call in a black neighborhood, Riggs would say, 'Jones, you take point, talk to your people.' Like I was a translator, not a firefighter. Then came the tests. They'd hide my gear, report me for minor uniform violations nobody else got cited for. The final straw was finding a noose, a stupid, twisted piece of rope in my locker. I reported it. Their investigation concluded it was likely a prank in poor taste and that I was overly sensitive." Vance felt a familiar cold rage. "Did you keep anything? Notes? Pictures?" "I kept everything," Jones said. "After they forced me out, I transferred to the training academy. I have a dated photo of the rope. I have a log of every biased comment, every delayed dispatch to my grandmother's neighborhood. I even have a copy of the original response time map before they sanitized it. It didn't just have colors, it had nicknames: the Zone of Patience, the Frequent Flyer District. This was the break Vance needed. Hard evidence that predated his arrival, proving the pattern was intentional and documented. Jones agreed to email everything. As Vance hung up, the first counterpunch landed. His desk phone rang. It was City Manager Alvarez, her voice strained. "Michael, we have a situation. The union president, O'Malley, just left the mayor's office. He's alleging you conducted an illegal interrogation without union representation, coerced statements, and targeted Lieutenant Riggs because of a personal vendetta stemming from last night's call." "That's not true," Vance started. "It doesn't matter if it's true, Michael," Alvarez interrupted. "The mayor is facing re-election. The Firefighters union is his biggest endorser. O'Malley is demanding your suspension pending an investigation into your conduct. He's framing this as an overzealous, outsider chief trying to purge loyal public servants." The ground was shifting beneath Vance's feet. The narrative was being stolen. "What's the mayor saying?" "He's saying he needs the political fire to go out," Alvarez said, her tone apologetic. "He's ordering an independent third-party review. You are to cease all internal interviews immediately. The station will remain on admin duty, but you are to make no further personnel moves." Vance's command was being stripped, his investigation halted. He understood now. The corruption wasn't confined to the station. It was protected by the political machinery of the entire city. To save the department's image, they were willing to sacrifice the truth. He walked back into the day room. The crew had heard the news. The tense atmosphere had shifted to one of smug defiance. Jake Dolan smirked. "Problem, Chief." Vance ignored him. He addressed Ben Carter. Acting Lieutenant Carter maintained the log collection, but interviews are paused per city order. He then returned to his office and locked the door. He opened his personal laptop away from the city's server. Marcus Jones's email had arrived. Attachments flooded in. The photo of the crude noose was sickeningly clear. The log of comments was meticulously detailed, but the most damning item was the original map. Neighborhoods were indeed labeled with mocking nicknames. Statistical delay times were written in the margins. At the bottom, in small print, was a file creation date and a user ID. "See Riggs admin." Riggs hadn't just used the map. He had created and updated it. This was premeditated, institutional bias. As Vance digested this, a new email popped up, this one from an anonymous sender. The subject line: "Audio you need." With a sense of foreboding, he opened it. There was an audio file dated from the previous year. He put in headphones and pressed play. It was the voice of Lieutenant Riggs, but not on dispatch. It was in what sounded like a bar background noise of clinking glasses. He was talking to another man, whose voice Vance didn't recognize. "Look, the city wants us to hire more diverse candidates," Riggs said, slurring slightly. "Fine, we'll hire M, but we'll run M through the mill, the physical test. We add 20 pounds to the dummy drag for their group. The written, we grade theirs harder. They either wash out or they learn their place is at the bottom. The brotherhood stays pure. It's just smarter that way." The other man chuckled. "And if someone like that new chief candidate, the Marine guy, gets through?" Riggs's voice turned cold. "Then he gets a welcome like no other. We'll see how long he lasts when his own crew treats him like a ghost." The recording ended. Vance sat back, stunned. This wasn't just about response times. This was a conspiracy to systematically discriminate in hearing and harass anyone who challenged the hierarchy. The anonymous sender had included a note. This was sent to the HR director 2 years ago after the Jones incident. It was lost. Protect yourself. The shadow war was now in the open. Someone inside the city bureaucracy was risking their career to help him, but the political noose was tightening faster. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife. A reporter just called the house asking for comment about you creating a hostile work environment. What's happening, Mike? The attack had become personal. They were targeting his family to pressure him. Vance knew he was at a crossroads. He could comply with the mayor's order, let the independent review, likely led by a firm chosen by the union, whitewash everything and probably be reassigned within months, or he could go nuclear. He made a decision. He copied all the evidence, the dispatch audio from his own call, Marcus Jones's files, the anonymous audio recording, onto a secure drive. Then he called the one person he knew who operated outside the city's political food chain, a veteran investigative reporter for the state newspaper, Sarah Chen. He'd worked with her years ago on a story about faulty fire equipment. "Sarah, it's Michael Vance. I have a story. It's bigger than one firehouse. Can you meet me off the record?" An hour later, in a quiet corner of a library downtown, Vance handed Sarah the drive. He laid out the entire story: the delayed response, the maps, the harassment of Marcus Jones, the union's political pressure, the mayor's intervention. Sarah listened, her expression turning from professional curiosity to grim determination. "This is explosive, Michael. If this audio is verifiable, it proves intent. It moves this from negligence to a coordinated conspiracy. But you know what happens next? The city will come for you. They'll smear you. They'll say you leaked because you were facing disciplinary action." "I know," Vance said, "but this isn't about me anymore. It's about Eleanor Banks, who died waiting. It's about every family in those neighborhoods who thinks the siren is for someone else. The story has to get out." As Sarah left to verify the evidence, the union's next move materialized. A formal grievance was filed against Vance with the Civil Service Commission, alleging a hostile work environment and abusive leadership. The local news, tipped off by the union, ran a headline: "New fire chief accused of bullying veteran firefighters." The narrative of the heroic chief cleaning house was being drowned out by a chorus of victimized, white firefighters. Back at the quarantine station, the mood was toxic. With the external pressure on Vance, the crew's defiance solidified. Ben Carter, trying to do his duty, was openly mocked. When he ordered the kitchen cleaned, Jake Dolan said loudly, "Why? You applying for chef now too?" The acting lieutenant's authority was non-existent. Vance realized the station was unsalvageable from within. The culture was a cancer, and the body was rejecting the treatment. His original mission, to transform it, had failed. The only remaining mission was to expose it, so the entire system could be forced to change. 2 days later, Sarah Chen's story exploded across the front page of the state paper and its website. The headline was brutal. Code red: "Audio reveals fire department bias was policy, not accident." The article featured verified clips from the bar audio, photos of the discriminatory maps, and the heartbreaking story of Eleanor Banks, juxtaposed with the laughing dismissal of her call. It named names: Riggs, the union president, and hinted at political protection from the mayor's office. The effect was immediate and volcanic. The state attorney general announced an investigation into civil rights violations. The Federal Department of Justice opened a preliminary inquiry. The mayor, in damage control mode, held an emergency press conference announcing the immediate suspension of Lieutenant Riggs and the full cooperation of the city with all investigations. He pointedly did not mention Chief Vance. The union went silent. The political cover had evaporated. In the court of public opinion, the firefighters of Station 17 were now villains. Vance watched the press conference from his office. He felt no victory, only a hollow exhaustion. The station was broken. The city was in scandal. He had won the battle to reveal the truth, but at the cost of his own position. He knew what came next. The mayor would need a scapegoat to prove the problem had been solved, and the outsider chief who rocked the boat was the obvious choice. He was packing a few personal items when city manager Alvarez walked in, her face unreadable. "The mayor wants your resignation, Michael, effective immediately." He'll announce a national search for a new chief to lead the reform. Vance nodded slowly. He'd expected it, and if I refuse, then the independent review will find you violated procedures in your investigation, and you'll be terminated for cause. Your pension, your reputation, it'll be harder to recover. Resign and you leave as a whistleblower, a martyr even. The city will offer a quiet settlement. It was a clean political offer. Take the fall and go away. Vance looked out at the bay floor one last time. The idle engine, the sullen crew, the shattered brotherhood. He thought of his daughters, of the electrical smoke, of the 22 minutes of silence. He turned back to Alvarez. Tell the mayor no, I won't resign. If he wants me gone, he has to fire me, in public, and I will fight it with every piece of evidence I have, in every court in the state. My fight for this department's soul started when I called for help and got laughter. It doesn't end with a quiet settlement. It ends when the last person responsible is held accountable. Alvarez stared at him, seeing the Marine, the chief, the unyielding father. She knew the mayor's bluff had been called. The city couldn't afford a wrongful termination lawsuit that would relitigate the entire scandal in the press. She left without another word. Vance was now in uncharted territory. He had rejected the exit ramp. He was still the chief of a mutinous, broken station, under investigation by his own city, with the eyes of the state and the country watching. He had no allies left inside the building, and his allies outside were political enemies of the mayor. He walked to the window. News vans had multiplied. Protesters from civil rights groups stood alongside supporters of the firefighters, the two groups shouting past each other. The battle for Station 17 was over. The war for the entire city's fire department had just begun, and Michael Vance, badge still on his chest, was now standing alone in the eye of the hurricane, with only one move left: to rebuild from the ashes on his own terms or burn it all down trying. The standoff lasted 3 days. 3 days of silence from the mayor's office, 3 days of Station 17 sitting in purgatory, its crew stripped of all duties, the city covered by other stations at enormous overtime cost. The political and financial pressure became unbearable. Then, the first domino fell from an unexpected direction. The state attorney general's office, armed with Sarah Chen's reporting and the evidence Vance had provided, served grand jury subpoenas to the firefighters, Union President O'Malley, and to former Lieutenant Carl Riggs. They were being investigated for conspiracy to violate civil rights. Riggs, facing not just job loss but potential criminal charges, broke. Through his lawyer, he offered to cooperate fully in exchange for immunity from prosecution. His testimony was devastating. He confirmed the existence of the discriminatory response protocols, named other officers in neighboring stations who participated in the MAP system, and detailed how the union actively suppressed harassment complaints. He admitted the audio recording from the bar was authentic. His cooperation was the master key that unlocked the entire rotten system. With Riggs's testimony, the city's legal position collapsed. The mayor could no longer protect anyone. In a closed-door meeting with Chief Vance and City Manager Alvarez, the mayor's council laid out the new reality. The city would accept full liability, but Vance had to oversee the dismantling. His terms were non-negotiable. Vance presented his terms. First, the immediate termination of Jake Dahlan and 2 other firefighters for documented harassment and insubordination. Second, the involuntary retirement of 5 more veterans, with full pensions but no chance of re-employment in any public safety role in the state. Third, the remaining crew at 17, including Ben Carter and Luis Garcia, would be dispersed to other stations for a fresh start, after mandatory retraining in cultural competency and emergency response ethics. Fourth, and most critically, Station 17 would not be closed. It would be reborn. The mayor, cornered, agreed. The next morning, the announcements rolled out like executions. Termination notices were handed out. Retirement papers were signed. The station was emptied, its crew scattered. The local news covered the exodus, the images of firefighters carrying boxes to their cars, a stark visual endpoint to the scandal. But for Vance, it was not an endpoint. It was the first step of a construction project. His next move was unprecedented. He petitioned the city to reopen the hearing process for Station 17 with a new blind protocol. Resumes would be stripped of names and addresses. The physical test would be standardized and proctored by an outside agency. He reached out directly to historic black firefighter associations, to veterans groups, to community colleges. He was not just looking for firefighters, he was looking for pioneers. The application pool was the most diverse the city had ever seen. Among the candidates was Marcus Jones, who applied to return to the house that had exiled him. Another was a former Marine sergeant, a woman named Ava Pierce. A third was a young paramedic from the very South Side, neighborhoods the old crew had ignored. Vance personally sat on the interview panel. While the new crew was being selected, the Federal Department of Justice announced its findings. It confirmed a pattern of intentional discrimination spanning years and issued a consent decree. The city's entire fire department was now under federal oversight, mandated to reform its hearing, promotion, and dispatch protocols. The decree would last for 10 years. The system, at long last, was being forced to change. 6 months to the day after the late-night smoke call, a ceremony was held at Station 17. The press was invited. The mayor gave a stiff speech about renewal, but the focus was on the 7 new firefighters standing at attention in front of a gleaming Engine 12. The crew was a deliberate mosaic: black, white, Latino, male, female. Marcus Jones stood proudly among them, his badge freshly polished. Acting Lieutenant Ben Carter, who had chosen to stay and help lead the new team, stood at the head of the line. Chief Vance addressed them, his voice carrying over the crowd. "You are not inheriting a legacy of brotherhood. You are inheriting a legacy of failure. Your first task is to burn that legacy down. Your second is to build something better in its place. You will be watched. You will be doubted. Prove them wrong." He then turned to the audience, which included families from the surrounding communities. "To you, our neighbors, we offer no more promises. Only this: our doors are open. Our response times will be public. Our conduct will be transparent. We will earn your trust one call at a time." The moment was powerful, but the true test came that very night. At 2 a.m., the dispatch tone dropped. A reported kitchen fire at an address in the old zone of patience. The new crew moved with synchronized, urgent efficiency. No sighs, no jokes. Just the slam of lockers, the roar of the engine, and the scream of sirens cutting through the night. They made the scene in 3 minutes 47 seconds. It was a small grease fire, extinguished quickly. But the response was textbook, professional, and devoid of any bias. It was, quite simply, the job. Over the following year, the metrics told the story. Response times across all districts equalized. Community complaints dropped to 0. Station 17's new crew developed a reputation for relentless professionalism. They held open houses, taught fire safety in schools, and became a visible, integrated part of the community they served. The Federal Monitor's reports noted remarkable progress and a model for systemic reform. For the individuals, the aftermath was more complex. Carl Riggs, having cooperated, served no jail time but lived in disgrace, his pension his only company. Jake Dolan, fired for cause, struggled to find any employment, his name forever tied to the scandal. The mayor chose not to run for re-election. And Michael Vance, the city, grateful and embarrassed, offered him a permanent position as chief, a raise, and a public commendation. He declined the commendation. He accepted the position, but on one condition: that his authority to hire, fire, and set policy be absolute for the duration of the federal consent decree. They agreed. The final, surprising detail emerged a year later, during a routine audit. The anonymous tipster who had sent the damning bar audio was finally identified. It was the wife of a retired fire captain, a woman who had listened to her husband's bitter stories for decades and had secretly recorded rigs one night to prove to her husband how toxic his old friends were. She sent it to HR first. When nothing happened, she kept the file, waiting for a moment when someone would actually listen. Her identity remained protected, a silent guardian who helped trigger the quake. Today, Station 17 still stands. The old maps are gone, replaced by a single, simple motto painted on the wall: "The call is everything." Michael Vance remains chief. His mission shifted from demolition to stewardship. The story that began with a dismissed call and a humiliated father ended not with a single victory, but with a hard-won standard. It proved that even the most entrenched systems of bias can be broken, not by goodwill alone, but by evidence, courage, and an unwavering refusal to let the siren of injustice go unanswered. The house was cleaned, and for the first time in its long history, it was truly open to all. The story of Station 17 is more than a dramatic showdown between a new chief and an old guard. It's a case study in how systemic bias can hide in plain sight, disguised as tradition, defended as brotherhood, and protected by silence. It proves that discrimination isn't always a dramatic act of hate. Sometimes, it's the quiet, casual choice to not respond, to not care, to devalue a life based on an address. For decades, fire departments across the country have wrestled with this same legacy. From the segregated beds of the past to the discriminatory hearing tests of the present, the struggle for true equality in emergency services is ongoing. The consent decree hanging over that city's fire department is a promise extracted through pain, a guarantee that change isn't a suggestion but a legal requirement. But a decree can't change hearts. Only people can do that. Michael Vance, Marcus Jones, Ben Carter, Luis Garcia, and the anonymous captain's wife, they were the people. They chose conscience over comfort, truth over tribe. They understood that the real emergency wasn't the fire in the kitchen, it was the corrosion in the culture. And they responded. So the lingering question isn't just about one firehouse. It's about every institution we trust. Where are the maps being drawn today, not on paper but in practice? In which neighborhoods are services slower, attitudes colder, assumptions quicker? The sirens will always tell us where the fire is. It's up to us to listen for the silence that tells us where the injustice is. If you found this story of accountability and hard-won change compelling, leave a like to support this channel. It helps more people find these important narratives. And make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is another you won't want to miss, exploring a hidden world of consequence and revelation. We have 2 special videos selected just for you on the screen now. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most powerful calls aren't always the ones we answer, but the ones we dare to make.